Hi. Over the past 3 weeks since I recorded my video about my thoughts on LGBTQ plus, outed myself publicly for the first time ever, and so on, I have interviewed a bunch of people, mostly people from the LGBTQ community, to get their thoughts on the broader topic of people who are transitioning or have transitioned from one gender to another, and what role they should play in sports. And so that includes 3 lesbian couples, and I believe I spoke to 3 gay men, and I spoke to a man who had started transitioning to woman with HRT and had aborted that. And finally, I talked to a man I knew who I was unaware, but had been suggested to me might possibly be somebody who had transitioned. Now, when I spoke to him, I wasn't really sure. And in the conversation, he revealed to me that he had been female and had transitioned to male, but would not reveal to me to what extent the transition was made. I asked, did you fully transition? And he was not willing to clarify that with me, which is understandable. I mean, we know each other casually at work, but we don't often work with each other. We haven't got a close relationship. We've had a couple, 3, 4, maybe interesting conversations, but that's it. So I did talk to a quote unquote, and this is a little bit difficult for me because when I was young, the term transsexual meant somebody who changed from one gender to another gender. Nowadays, apparently the definitions have changed somewhat, and so I'm a little bit behind the times, so I apologize if I don't use the correct terms. Amongst the people I spoke to, some of them were athletes, or former athletes, I should say, and but the majority of them were not. A lot of them were unaware of Leah Thomas, and Riley Gaines and Paula Scanlon. Some of them were aware peripherally, and others were definitely aware of that situation. And my purpose in talking to these people, all of whom I knew, some whom I know very, very well, and some whom I just barely know, like one lesbian couple, I have known for over a year now, and I kind of think of them as daughters, and I'm always very, very happy to see them. There's another lesbian couple who I barely know and don't really have an interest in knowing because I don't need to explain why. And then the third lesbian couple I've worked with extensively for most of the time I've been at Amazon, and I get along well with them. When one of them used to be a team leader or a PA, process assistant, I was really impressed with her as a PA. I used to call her one of my favorites. The other one, her partner was formerly, I forget if she was a therapist or social worker, something along those lines. And so we would have very interesting conversations about psychology and stuff like that. And I felt fairly close to them too, but not in the same way as the other couple, which was a younger couple, and who, as far as I can understand, the couple that I look at as my daughters, also kind of look at me as a kind of a father figure, which is great because there are different kinds of lesbians out there, and some of them really don't like men. And I get it. There are men out there that don't like women, and I don't take offense at that. It's not. I know it's not about me personally. It's about their experiences, and I don't. That's fine. And there are talking to all of them. The first thing I discovered is that they don't all agree. Not surprisingly. Now, you would think, they're all LGBTQ. Plus, they should all support these transitioning people, right? No. They're all people. They may all fall under this broad umbrella of people from a different perspective on sexuality, or they may be people who are trans or queer, so they have a different perspective on gender. But that doesn't make them all the same. They're not clones. We're not clones. Okay? So there's no way that we're all going to have the same viewpoint on this topic. And so when I talked to athletes, even they didn't agree. I talked to one of the gay men that I talked to was a former athlete. He was very much in support. One of the lesbian the daughters of mine, she was very much, as was her partner, in support of people who are transitioning being allowed in the locker room and all that. And there was a third one who was kind of in the middle. Many of them felt okay with somebody transitioning and then going into the sports that they're interested in their new gender assignment. There were a small number that did not agree with that, but the vast majority did. And there was one whom I thought was an athlete because he's very buff. But he actually was kind of one of the ones that was kind of opposed. Not an athlete, not a former athlete, just very physically fit because of our jobs at Amazon. And he was more conservative than almost all the other ones on the whole topic. There was one part of him that was like, no, I don't think that they should. But he was kind of compromising a little bit on that. I think he was having an internal struggle, perhaps, between beliefs he had been brought up with and wanting to be fair to people. And so it was extremely interesting to talk to these people. Some of whom are friends of mine, and get their thoughts on it. Some of them were more talkative. Some of them were less talkative. They were all willing to talk to me, and that was great. And one of them, or two of them, pointed out that they don't feel that I'm a judgmental person, which is, that's I try not to be judgmental. I don't always succeed, but I do try not to be judgmental because I don't know people's life story. And I don't know what motivates them. And it's hard sometimes because I work with some very nice people who are exceedingly lazy. And I don't know why. I don't know if there's a medical condition that they're not talking about. I don't know if there is a mental condition they're not talking about. I don't know if they're just lazy. I don't know if they're just there to suck the teat of Amazon. And quite frankly, Amazon takes huge advantage of all of us, and is very duplicitous, but in some ways, while also offering very nice benefits. LinkedIn says they provide the best benefits in the world, but I know for a fact that's not true. And so, yeah, it's not like a universal agreement amongst this dozen or so people from the LGBTQ plus community that I spoke to. But in general, they were like, okay with it. Now, what really surprised me was a small number of them felt like it's okay for transitioning pre-puberty or during puberty. But others were adamantly opposed to that. Now, I'm personally, having talked to them, it kind of helped me to form a stronger opinion myself on it, and using their input as well as my understanding of psychology, which granted I am not an expert on psychology or medicine. These things that I say on my channel are informed by what I know, but I know enough to be dangerous but not an expert. And there's that Neil deGrasse Tyson advertisement for some TV show that he's doing, where he talks about it's you know enough to be a problem or dangerous or whatever, but you don't know enough to actually be an expert, and you have to be aware of when you're in one category and when you're in the other. And when you're in that first category of knowing some but not really enough, that's when it's really a problem. So in considering things, in my first video I talked about, well, if somebody transitions during or before puberty, and when I speak of puberty in this sense, I'm talking about the physical aspects of it. I'm not talking about the full puberty at this point. I'm talking about partial puberty, in that their transition from child to young adult is not complete. Okay, there is a stage during puberty at which you are basically an adult. However, you may or may not have your wisdom teeth in, which is kind of, suggestive of the difference between a young adult and a full adult, although not really. And your brain isn't fully developed until around the age of 25. Some people younger, some people older, and some people, even though they've got a full brain, they still don't act like they've got a full brain, a fully developed brain, that is. Anyways. So in talking with these people and in thinking about what I know about psychology and the body, I came to the realization that it is, in cases where a child wants to transition before they're an adult, I don't think that it is a good idea unless, and I don't want to go too much into this, but unless there are certain criteria that are met. And even then it's risky, because the society that your child is in, that you are in, most societies that I'm aware of are very, very anti-trans, transitioning, from one gender to another. Now, if your child is a male transitioning to female, female transitioning to male, I don't really think that's a good idea to allow them to do that until they are an adult. I'm not saying that you should tell them, no, you can't ever. I'm just saying that you should make it clear to them, not make them, but make it clear to them that at this point there are things you don't know and you can't possibly understand properly until you have lived longer. And if you can, move somewhere where they can be in a supportive environment to consider this without the pressures and abuse that, say, fundamentalist Christians and certain other fundamentalist religious people will heap on them. Now, not all fundamentalist Christians are like that. I know some that are much more accepting about it, but some of the fundamentalists are very vicious, unpleasant people. I don't like being around them because they're very narrow-minded, very bigoted, and just, yeah. And I'm not just talking about Christians. Okay, so if we think about the psychology of a child versus the psychology of a teen versus the psychology of a young adult versus the psychology of a full adult, they're not the same thing. Each of them is going through something very different. And there are things, mental health issues, that only crop up at certain points in a person's life because they're and usually it's around puberty. There are physical and mental health changes that can occur in some bloodlines during puberty, in my family included. For example, when I was a kid, went through puberty, started getting horrible ingrown toenails. Nobody had ever warned me about it. Didn't really understand what it was, just knew that it hurt, and I was getting infections, and I was trying to, keep that infection under control, get rid of it, dealing with it on my own until my parents somehow finally found out. I don't remember how. And then they started taking me to podiatrists, and that was torture. I mean, literally, that was torture. Because the first podiatrist was just inept. And one time I was in there while he was working on that toe, and I was screaming at the top of my lungs. And everybody in the lobby knew it. So, yeah. That's one thing that in my family happens. I mean, both of my kids ended up with ingrown toenails. And just like me, they had to have surgery, which is called a matrixectomy, to remove the roots that on the sides of the nail that produce the ingrown toenails, because it just keeps on coming back and coming back and coming back and coming back. And in my case, and in my son's case, and my daughter's case, we tried the simple way first without removing the roots, and multiple times with my son, multiple times with me, one time with my daughter. It does not work for us. So, if you've got a family history of ingrown toenails and the podiatrist says, let's just try this way first, say no. But anyways, I'm digressing. And there are certain mental health issues that are triggered in many members of my family, including depression and anxiety during puberty. So, a child wanting to transition, there are many different reasons why they might want to transition. One of them could be that it has become plain through medical records, for example, that the child's gender assignment from birth was incorrect. Maybe the child was labeled as a male, but turned out when puberty started that the child was developing breasts. Maybe the child was labeled as female, but then suddenly what was thought to be the clit actually was the penis. And then there are the people who are middle sex or intersex, where they have both male and female anatomy. And then there are the people with androgyny, where they really don't have much male or female androgyny. It's very minimal. Sorry, not androgyny, but parts, body parts that are specific to male or female in the world of medicine. There are people who have had involuntary surgeries as babies, where the doctor, with or without the parents' consent, has altered the baby surgically to conform to one gender or another. So, in these situations, there may be a very strong basis for that child wanting to transition. But even under those conditions, I would be very hesitant. I'm not saying don't support the child in their desire, but I would be very hesitant to expose them to the abuses and evils of the world at that point. And I would definitely, if they're having trouble at school, if they come out with this, that you move them somewhere where, if the administration is not supportive, and some administrations are very abusive at schools, move them to where your child will be safe. If that means you have to change the city you're living in, the state you're living in, so be it. Get as far away from you can as the haters allow you to, or as far away from the haters as you can, period, if you have that option. And that's going to be hard on you. It's going to be hard on your kids. And you're going to have to do it in such a way that if you've got other kids who are not having this quandary, that you're going to have to do it in such a way that your kids don't realize, oh, we're moving because my brother or my sister. Because, oh, they're like this. Because then the whole blame thing starts and the animosity starts. So then within the family, there's a problem. Also, your child will probably need some kind of therapy. And be very careful, because within the therapy community, there are people who are pedophiles who are looking for children to victimize. And this is not just the therapy community. There are teachers, there are religious leaders, there are people, guardian ad litem, police. There are people anywhere where there are people with access to children, where they can be alone with children, childcare. For example, pedophiles are attracted to those jobs so they can abuse children, which is very sad. As somebody who was abused as a child by a friend, it's very sad. I've had variations of this happen with both my kids. My wife was abused as a child. Other people I know, many, especially females, have told me about their abuse experiences. I grew up understanding, at least for females, because males don't talk about this as much, that abuse of females as children was rampant in the U.S. And this was, I'm 57, so we're talking about back in the 70s and 80s, I was discovering this. In fact, in my neighborhood, there was one family where the father and the brother were sexually active with the sisters. So, in my somewhat educated opinion, and some of the people I interviewed, we feel that it is not advisable in most cases to allow a child who is prepubescent or going through the early stages of puberty where there's a lot of turmoil going on physically and mentally to transition. Because some of the things that are done if you go full transition are irreversible. And in many places, if it is discovered that somebody has transitioned, that person will be persecuted mercilessly. And in not all cases, in fact, I would say there more than not, especially if the person has a mental health issue like body dysmorphia or gender dysmorphia, transitioning may not bring them mental health relief. And if they are in a hostile environment, that transition will make it worse. And there is I'm told, a high rate of suicide amongst people who have transitioned, primarily because of abuse by other people. Also, don't let them do it online. Don't let them tell the world until they're adults and mentally, once they're adults, it's up to them, obviously, but make sure they understand that they're going to expose themselves to a world that is very, very hostile on some fronts. Now, if the person is middle sex or has been misgendered, there's more leeway there, and you should talk, and you and your child and your partner should have several conversations with medical and mental health experts who are neutral on the topic, but supportive and well-informed. Do not take them to a priest and let the priest say, oh, you were born female and you're going to stay a female, and if you turn into a male, you're going to go to hell. Because you are condemning your child to mental health issues and torment by exposing them to somebody who is mentally abusing them like that. Yes, it is mental abuse. I don't care if this video doesn't get monetized. This video is not about money. This video is about doing the right thing. Once somebody has gotten through all the mental anguish of puberty, and that can be ongoing until 25, as sometimes even into your 30s or 40s, well after puberty has finished, if you're not getting help for it, and in some cases like schizophrenia, medication for it, it may take a really long time before you are mentally ready for the consequences, good and bad, of transitioning. Now, like I said, one of the people I spoke to, he had started to transition to woman and ended up halting his HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy. And he did that because he realized ultimately that it wasn't actually what he needed or perhaps wanted. So my advice in general is don't have your child have surgery prior to the completion of puberty. And it's going to be hard sometimes because some kids are going to be very adamant. So again, find experts who are neutral but supportive on the topic Go see them with your kids. Do not leave your kids alone with people you think are experts. This because they're experts doesn't mean that you can trust them to be alone with your kids. Always be there with your kids. And if there's like these confidential meetings that have to happen, then there should be a camera where you can see what's going on, if not hear. That way you know there's no hanky-panky of the worst possible kind. That way you can try to make sure there's no grooming, no seduction. But getting back to the topic, what are my thoughts now on somebody who's transitioning being allowed into the locker room of the gender they're transitioning to? Well, this is a sticky question. So if this person is doing it for legitimate reasons, they legitimately want to transition. They're not just pretending or just doing the hormones or something like that, or say they're doing the hormones just so they can get into the locker room of the other gender, the opposite gender that they are, and ogle the people there and seduce the people there and whatnot. Assuming that that's not the situation. And there are ways to figure that out. Like, for example, if they say they're on HRT, then you need documentation. Medical proof, stating from a doctor that, yes, this child is on this person is on HRT. Here, and an official document that from the doctor in charge of that, or doctors, or whatever they are. Medical experts of some kind, mental health experts. I would suggest both medical doctor and mental health expert. And in advance of this person starting to go to the locker room of their destination gender, I guess you could say, make sure that the kids, or not the kids, but whoever it is that's in that locker room understands. And provide privacy spots for all of the kids who do not feel comfortable, or the parents do not feel comfortable. And if the parents are complaining about it, say, look, we understand how you feel, and that's fine. We're providing stalls where your child can shower privately, where your child can change clothes privately, so that in the event of something wrong happening, your child is not exposed to it. We don't believe anything is going to happen, but we understand how you feel, so we are providing privacy stalls for changing and for bathing, or showering, I should say. And after the families are told of this, they're given a period of time in which to understand and maybe not agree to it, but just say, okay, well, it is what it is. Or, well, good for you. Or, depending on what kind of people they are. And I know some of you are out there and thinking, well, why can't they just stay in their original gender locker room until they finish transitioning? Well, here's the thing. If you're transitioning, you may be getting harassment in that locker room. I can easily see that happening. Easily. So you're not safe in your original locker room. And maybe you're not safe in your target locker room. But at least you feel like you actually belong in your target locker room. Whereas in your original locker room, you don't. And when you're transitioning, you're in a very vulnerable state physically and mentally. So, I feel like, having a unisex locker room is maybe if you're like full adults, and you're in a very egalitarian society, perhaps a unisex locker room with privacy stalls or whatever is okay, but I think, for kids, no, I don't think that's ever going to work. Because hormones play a huge role. I was raised a certain way, and I came to believe certain additional things that's about how to behave toward a woman. But around the time that I was 17, there was I was dating this amazing girl, and really just head over heels for her. And this friend of my sister came and tried to seduce me, and just like that, something flipped inside of me, and I became different, very, very horny. And it's ironic because in that school year, I took a class on parenting, and the teacher, I was the only male in the class. Everybody else was a female, including the teacher. And at one point, the teacher was just saying this: men play at love to get sex, women play at sex to get love. And I raised my hand and I said, I'm not like that. And then, when that happened, I became not playing at love to get sex. That was not what I was doing. I was not pretending to love this female that had tried to seduce me. It was just about the sex. And I'm not going to say who this person was. They know. I eventually explained everything to them, and they thanked me for that. But this person that I had loved had gone through some horrific experiences, and I really, really wanted to be intimate with her. But at the same time, it was obvious to me that she was not really on board with that, and I didn't want to push it with her because I was worried about how that would make her feel. And so when that switch occurred in me where I became very, very horny, I sought to appease that urge with other people. And I've always regretted that. I've apologized to my ex-girlfriend multiple times. She's now happily married. But yeah, it was, when you're going through puberty, you don't know what you don't know. And I did not ever think, because intellectually I was all set to, I'm going to be like this. And I was like that. Now, again, I did not play the thing where, oh, I love you, honey, let's go to bed. No, that was not what I did. If it was sex, it was sex. If it was love, it was, love and sex. And I tried to avoid the whole sex for the sake of sex thing, because at least when I was younger, I had some very conflicted feelings about that. And that would make me angry at myself, and in turn, with me being angry at myself, I'd become angry at and disrespectful toward the woman. In fact, there was a wonderful young lady who I went to university with, and I was in her room, and her roommate was out, and I was on the floor. She was on her bed. We were just talking, and suddenly I became aware that I was very, very excited. And I said, I'm sorry, I need to go. I'm very excited. And she said, no, stay. And I was like, no, I'm sorry, I can't. It wouldn't be good if I did. And she was trying to convince me to stay. And I think maybe that was because she felt the same way. I'm not really sure. but I knew what would happen because I was still in that phase of I would end up mistreating her because I was angry with myself. And so I left. I can't say that I always was successful in doing the right thing. Anyways, I have ranged so far from the topic. So, if you are an adult, seek out medical and mental health professionals who are supportive people, but not who are like, oh yeah, do it. But let's talk about this. Let's understand the pros and the cons. Let's understand that there are certain mental health risks that can occur, some physical changes that you're probably going to go through no matter what you do, and that quite possibly you're never going to look the way you want to look, no matter how many surgeries you have. I mean, I've seen like the guy who transitioned, and I didn't know it. Very attractive. No clue. There was something about him that gave off this vibe of like, oh, maybe he's gay. But it had never occurred to me that he was transitioned. So and yet I've seen other people. I've been friends with transsexuals before or transgenders before, where they just how do I say this? Physically, they had transitioned to say female, but they still looked male. It was not. If they were hoping that transitioning was going to make them look beautiful or something, it didn't happen, unfortunately. Very nice people. Very, very nice. But also vulnerable. And I was supportive of them then. I'm still supportive of them now, even though I don't have contact with them. And I hope that they're okay. I hope they're doing well, actually, not just okay. So I guess, having thought about this a lot more, I'm more now on the fence about it. And some of the things that the people from the LGBTQ community, some of the things that they said are reasons why I'm more on the fence, but mostly it's a realization that it's a lot more complex than what I originally was thinking when I did my first video. So, what are your thoughts on this topic? Do you think that anybody should ever transition? Please be respectful. No matter what your thoughts are on this topic, I demand respectful communication on my channel. If you are not going to be respectful, be quiet, or I will have to report you or delete your comments or ban you, or all three, because I'm not going to put up with it. There are people out there that are rabidly, vehemently vile on certain topics. And I have no interest in hearing that you're poison, nor exposing my viewers to your poison, because it is poison. And I hope you clean that poison out of you. That kind of hatred doesn't need to be in this world. So I know I'm kind of painting a target on my back, but you know what? I've always painted a target on my back ever since I was, in middle school, I guess. This is when I started painting a target on my back by refusing to conform. And I still refuse to conform. I try to do the right thing, not the thing that's convenient or the thing that's going to get me the most votes or the most popularity or something like that. And that's where I differ from a lot of other people. And, to me, I have more backbone than a lot of people. But it also comes at a cost that I take more crap from people. I've had people who stopped being my friends because they felt I was not masculine enough. Your loss, not mine. So, yeah. almost everything in life is a spectrum. It's not black and white. There is the dichotomy idea is a fallacy. Okay, this whole yin yang thing is a fallacy. It's not black and white. It is black, gray, white. It's a spectrum. So, how do you feel? Do you think children, given the psychological changes they have not yet gone through and the possible mental health illnesses that are going to pop up during puberty, do you think it's a good idea for them to be allowed to transition? Especially if they're legitimately transitioning from one gender to another, not correcting a misassignment of gender. How do you feel about them going into the locker room before of their new gender prior to completing transition? How do you feel about them competing in the new sport? Now, please do keep in mind, and this was pointed out to me by some of the people I spoke to, that when you transition from male to female, like Leah Thomas did, there is a tendency for your hands to get smaller and your feet to get smaller and to lose some height and to lose muscle mass. Your bones can even change somewhat. And if you're transitioning from female to male, the opposite can occur. So there is some compensatory physical changes occurring. And also, let's point out, in one interview that I saw with Riley Gaines, she pointed out that she and Leah had competed and tied. They tied. Here's a trans male to female, much bigger than Riley, and they tied. And she complained about that because, and rightfully so, because the judge gave the trophy not to both of them, but to Leah, because Leah was transitioning or had transitioned. I don't know at that time. And then at a later date, there was another competition where Leah flat out won. And Riley was complaining about that and talking about, well, people who transition from male to female have this advantage. So which one is it? You and Leah tied, and you're not happy about that because you didn't get the trophy, and I understand that. I don't know if Riley was in that race or not, but Leah kicked everybody's butts, and that's not okay because they transitioned, where they legitimately won. Now, in the case of both Riley and Paula Scanlon, it was clear that religion was a motivation. So there's some intolerance. Also, in the case of Riley, she was, at least through part of the story, if not all of it, already married and didn't want another man seeing her naked, even though Leah was transitioning to woman. And you guys have no idea how hard it is for somebody to go through that process. The physical changes, the mental changes, the discomforts, the knowledge that no matter what, they're never going to be fully 100% that new gender. And they have to struggle with accepting that. And then to have people heaping abuse on them. It's not right. So should somebody who has transitioned be allowed to compete in their target gender's sports activities? Or perhaps should there be a unisex category where it doesn't matter whether you're male, female, or intersex or something, androgynous? I can see that being viable. Now, I also talked to all of these people about the idea of, well, what can we do to make it fair so that women who are competing against males who have transitioned to females and are physically bigger don't feel, or maybe smaller, don't feel like it's unfair. And I got various answers. Some didn't know. Some felt like it should be based on the body. like in boxing and wrestling. And some felt it should be skill, and some felt it should be both. Now, there are some sports where a smaller physique is advantageous, and there are some sports where a larger physique is advantageous. So if you are in, say, for example, parallel bars, it's better to be a smaller person. Acrobatics, it's better to be a smaller person. Pole vaulting, I would say probably better to be a smaller person, simply because there's less of you to push over that bar. And then in swimming, my understanding is it's better to be a larger person. In basketball, definitely better to be a taller person. So what do we do? And I'm talking about individual or pair sports, not group sports, because in group sports, there are different people in different positions. They can be different sizes, so it all works out in a lot of those sports. But in sports where it's 1 versus 1 or one over, it's a bunch of people competing individually or as pairs, what should be the criteria for saying you compete with you compete? Are we going to do like the boxing and wrestling people do? Are we going to say, number one, like in baseball and basketball, football, soccer, what level of skill are you? Or are we going to do a combination of them? Or is it going to be dependent on what the sport is? Now, I think there needs to be flexibility. For some sports, it should be based on body. And some sports, it should be based on skill level. In fact, I think, honestly, why would it never be about skill level? You don't want to take a rank amateur who doesn't have the skill level of an Olympic athlete and compete against each other. It's not going to work out. Now, I'm not talking about the exception. That one exception, there was a movie made with, I think it was Mark Wahlberg, where I think and it was the Falcons. They had an open invitation to anybody because whatever that football team was, they sucked. And they needed to find new athletes. And so they had an open trial for anybody. And this one guy who was encouraged by his friends, and he went and he actually became a professional football player, having no professional or semi-professional background in football, and did very well for himself. But that's the exception, not the rule. But he was already highly skilled. Even though he wasn't professionally skilled, he was highly skilled. He just had the right stuff, the right moves, the right body. So I think in every case there should be a division by skill, and in some cases there should be a further division by body, mass or type, something like that. And in some sports, I don't think it matters. If you look at martial arts, you might say, oh, this person is really tall, this person is really short, so it's not fair. Well, actually, there are certain advantages inherent to the smaller person because they're a smaller target, whereas the tall person is a bigger target. Now, if you talk about somebody who's super muscular against somebody who is not, the chances of the not super muscular person winning it's a definite skew. Okay. Now, if we're talking about a competition where there aren't very many restrictions, more along the lines of, say, boxing, like in the Ip Man series, you saw Ip Man and the other Chinese experts fighting this Caucasian monster who was hugely muscular, and he defeated the first guy who was at the same level as Ip Man as far as his skills and stuff. But he started beating on the man's, I think it was his arm, to try and weaken that arm because the arm was such a threat. And he told Ip Man, beat on that vein, beat on that vein, beat on that vein, beat on that vein, because that will incapacitate that arm. And Ip Man did that, and it managed to defeat this monstrous human being, despite the fact that he would not have been able to with all of his skills otherwise, according to the movie. I don't know the reality, but according to the movie. So we need to. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, as well as what I've already spoken about. If you are somebody who has transitioned and would like to talk to me privately about it, just leave a message. It doesn't have to be specific. You can just say you'd like to, just put it in words that you're not going to draw attention to yourself, but that I'll understand that you are somebody who has transitioned and you want to discuss it with me. Whether or not you want to do an interview that goes on the channel, that's up to you. But I would love to hear opinions. If you feel confident about putting it on here, I will make sure that if anybody attacks you, that I'll have your back. So thanks so much for everybody not blasting the hell out of me because of my first video. And now to all of you who are from a different group who are probably going to feel like I should blast him because you're one of those intolerant people. I appreciate it very much if you just don't. Because if I get you banned on YouTube, that's your fault, not mine. I'm protecting my audience. I'm protecting myself. You come at me, you take the consequences. And that's a promise, not a threat. I'm certainly not going to come after you physically. And I'm not going to character assassinate. Thanks again. Have a wonderful day. And please, be tolerant. Unity over division. Because as long as we're divided, we are easy victims for the people with the wealth and the power who like to victimize.